This is an interview conducted by Miles Spieler and Alejandro Osegueda on April 17th, 2025. This interview was part of Recording Music, Recording History, which was an after-school program at Walnut Hills High School that explored the history of the neighborhood of Evanston in Cincinnati and the history of King Records.
Beverly Lamb and Christine Anderson led workshops at Walnut Hills High School.
This interview was with Tyrone Yates, who was vice mayor of Cincinnati, city council member for a very long time, state representative for the state of Ohio, and now he is a Hamilton County municipal judge. Yates grew up in the neighborhood of Walnut Hills in Cincinnati.
Walnut Hills, when I was growing up, was terrific. It was a great community. I think it was probably largely working class with a lot of African-American professionals. Of course, it has changed after that, become much more impacted by poverty, joblessness, even some violence. But historically, growing up, I thought Walnut Hills was quite idyllic. I attended Douglas Elementary School in Walnut Hills, which would be considered an excellent school at the time that I was growing up. The first brick one, I think, was built in about 1912, 1913. So I went to Douglas, wonderful teachers there. Still remember lessons that I've never forgotten, that have exceeded all the other schools that I've attended. And I've attended a lot of the schools in my time. As an adult, I lived in East Walnut Hills on Cross Lane for many years and used to run and walk about 4 miles every day, 3 miles every day. And came to be sort of well known for traversing and loving Walnut Hills every day.
While Yates grew up in the neighborhood of Walnut Hills, he also has an important connection with the neighborhood of Evanston.
I didn't grow up in Evanston, but I did attend church there, where I attend now for the last 61 years. I have a lot of experience in the Evanston community. That foundation is established at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. I started attending the church at 10, so it would have been February of 1964 was when I began, and have continued to attend the church and be also involved in the leadership of that church in the Evanston community. But it was, at that time, a very stable, middle-class, largely African-American community with a lot of African-American professionals who had not yet moved out. From, I would say, the 70s through a couple of years ago, it was moved to primarily working-class African-American community. And now Evanston is considered Hyde Park West. Now, I've actually forgotten a lot of people moving in. I think you'd call it gentrification. I completely forgot. I had a house in Evanston that I lived in for 13 years until just 2 years ago. I've had a long relationship with the Evanston community. I lived at 1734 Fairfax Avenue, the house in Evanston that has the American flag flying out in the yard. A lot of great experiences there.
Yates' family has a long history in the city of Cincinnati.
I always knew that my great-grandfather was a college man. In fact, he graduated from Ohio State University in 1903 in one of the first classes in the new College of Pharmacy there. He settled in Cincinnati around 1906, 1907, and had a pharmacy right at the corner of Alms and Chapel, which is right across the street from Douglas School. I never knew that as a child. I didn't know that I was kind of a historical legacy. And he and his business, they made a lot of money in their business. He and his doctor and business partner. And that business was there from about 1908 until 1922, 23, 24, when he later moved to Baltimore for business. So there was a powerful historical legacy in my great-grandfather. I think he graduated from Douglas in about 1915. My father in 1937, and then me and my siblings. And I've had any number of relatives, a couple of great aunts who were big landowners in Walnut Hills. And people still remind me as I go through Walnut Hills today of my Aunt Sally and my Aunt Nettie.
Can you tell us a little bit about your parents?
My mother, she's deceased now, but my mother's name was Jo Ann Dickerson Yates. My mother grew up in Madisonville, and like what people most say about their mother, she was quite extraordinary. She went to Withrow High School. Her favorite subject was civics, which seemed to kind of run in our DNA because my great-grandfather, when I went to take things out of my grandfather's library, I took away my great-grandfather's 4-volume set of George Washington. I majored in history myself at the college level, and I consider myself a historian now, working on a book right now. My father, his name was William Artist Yates Jr., and he was the fairest man I ever knew. I don't think anybody was a better driver than Daddy either. My father was manufacturing chemist for Freeze and Freeze, which was a flavor making company that was based here in the Carthage area and had 8 subsidiaries around the world. And I used to love to go to this is in the early 60s. I used to love as a little boy to go to work with him. You like to go to work with your dad. And I remember when he was mixing formulas, he had some kind of pre-computer thing, and his fingers would just dance across the keyboards, figuring out the formulas. He was always so decent. But my father died when I was 15 in 1968.
The Black experience is very visible in Walnut Hills through the many landmarks of Black history in the neighborhood.
Were there any people or places that were most important in Walnut Hills?
Yes, walking to school, we'd walk past the Harriet Beecher Stowe House every day. And I had no idea, really, of the significance. It's like going to the library on a school trip, something I hated. And so going on a school trip to the Stowe House was, at that time, just as boring to me. But now I'm a great admirer of the house and its setting in Walnut Hills. I've been a member of the board and I'm a life member. And I think I played a role in its $1 million renovation, which is extraordinary because the Ohio Historical Society typically gives out small grants. At the time that they did the renovation to restore it to its original building, the Ohio Historical Society gave them $1 million, and it may have been in part because I'd been the representative to the Ohio Historical Society when I was a member of the Ohio legislature. There were a couple of housing areas. Braxton Campbell Court was one, which was, I suppose, built after or near the Second World War, where a lot of working class but very solid African Americans lived. I mentioned Mount Zion Methodist Church. It had been the church of Mayor Theodore Embury, of Samuel Ross Wright, who was president of the NAACP, of former Vice Mayor Marion Spencer, for which the Spencer School is named in Walnut Hills, and a number of other physicians. It was kind of the Methodist equal of St. Andrews, but it was a very stable area. The headquarters for the Cincinnati Herald, the Black newspaper, was on Lincoln Avenue. First Baptist Church there at Park and Lincoln, an extraordinary Baptist church with a great many African-American leaders. Only that, the Lane Seminary is right next to Thompson-McConnell Cadillac. The Lane Seminary was a hotbed of abolitionism near the Civil War. And once they forced out of Cincinnati the seminarians, they helped to establish Oberlin College, which was the first university or college in the United States to admit women and to admit African Americans. As a matter of fact, one of the children from the Amistad ship, you've heard of that movie, one of the children attended Oberlin. One of the United States senators, one of the 2 United States senators from Mississippi in the Reconstruction period were Oberlin graduates. So the Lane Seminary there, Douglas School itself is indicated. The public library there was, I think, funded largely by Andrew Carnegie. Walnut Hills is just a historical place and a magical place.
Can you talk more about how St. Andrews impacted the community over the years?
St. Andrews, when it moved to Evanston, circa 1962, 1963, still maintained a powerful impact as it had when it was on Mount Street. And it had to move from Mount Street downtown in the West End because of I-75 coming through. But the membership was very strong and radiated across almost all the institutions, public institutions in Cincinnati. Places like GE Aerospace Engineer, where a cluster of aerospace engineers, including my godfather, were senior aerospace engineers at GE. It had so many teachers among the members. It was just unbelievable. And as a matter of fact, the way that I became a member of St. Andrews at 10 is that I attended what they call a pancake supper in 1964 with my grandfather. And when we got to the basement, they call that the undercroft in the Episcopal Church. I saw almost all my teachers from Douglas School. And I saw my favorite teacher, my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Lucille Conliff. And I said to myself, this is the place for me. College presidents, or a college president, has been a member there. Dr. Rufus Atwood, who was president emeritus of Kentucky State University. So when he retired, he and his wife moved to Cincinnati and joined St. Andrews. Jesse Owen, the Olympian, used to visit there. So we still retain a great legacy of members. As I said, St. Andrews had many, many African-American first Board of Health member, first United States Marshal, many members of various fraternities and sororities, the first African-American graduate of the UC Medical School. And then St. Andrews had a number, and we retain a number of social outreach programs. St. Andrews housed the first Girl Scout troop for African Americans, the first Boy Scout troop for African Americans. And he had a great forum series where great speakers would come in all the time. It was just terrific. An employment service. You name the kind of outreach, work with women, educational programs, and we still maintain some of those programs today. And by the way, I'm the senior warden of St. Andrews, which means that I'm essentially the chairman of the Board of Trustees and also on the Reparations Commission of the Diocese of Southern Ohio and vice chairman of the trustees of the diocese, which governs the William Cooper Proctor Fund, which endows the diocese as one of the wealthiest dioceses in the United States. So my involvement, my grandfather and my great-grandfather, all that goes back about 113 years of St. Andrews. They'd be smiling that their grandson and great-grandson would have this kind of involvement in a diocese that they have been a part of.
Did you listen to music produced at King Records?
I'm sure I did. As a child in the Black community, we only knew one station, and that was WCIN.
WCIN playing.
That was the only station that we listened to.
We're the heart and soul of Cincinnati. AM 1480, WCIN.
All of the, what you call the soul music, and certainly James Brown, his music. Although I had other things to do, like play baseball, ride my bicycle, watch the cartoons, the Beatles, read. So the radio wasn't a staple, but surely all of the artists who were active at King would have been on the radio list. In the last several months, I've been meeting with the rector, that's the priest at Redeemer Episcopal Church in Hyde Park, and we are going to partner St. Andrews and our leadership and Redeemer and their leadership on a capital campaign that Redeemer is just beginning to raise money for the restoration of King Records. My own experience as a historian is that African American history is very often erased, across the country as a result of presumably systematic or institutional discrimination, racism. And so the opportunity to preserve the spaces in Walnut Hills and King Records and across the country are invaluable.
In Yates's lifetime, Evanston has and continues to change.
Evanston is poor at this point, although it's moving into a great transition where you'll find now $400,000 homes being built and homes being renovated. In fact, the house that I bought in 2003 in Evanston at the corner of Fairfax and Fairfield, I bought it to homestead to make sure that community significance was there in the community as the glue. But it has suffered from probably since the late 60s from people who were professionals in Black moving out to suburban areas. So it changed in that regard. I think that minor crime is probably greater now than when I was a child. But Evanston is coming back. They have a strong community council. It has the recreation center that it didn't have. The recreation center wasn't built until the mid-90s.
The neighborhood of Walnut Hills has also changed.
Well, Walnut Hills, when I was growing up, it felt idyllic. You had your neighborhood store, Max's store, a lot of nuclear families that were strong, neighbors that were strong. It was a real community, and working class people had the kinds of values that have created the kinds of young people growing up who listened to their elders, and that kind of social glue isn't there as much as it should be at this time. And so it's a struggling neighborhood, but there's a lot of people moving in. It's much more diverse. You know, when I was a child, you could go for a year without seeing a person of a different race or ethnic group on the street. You might go 5 years, but now Walnut Hills is much more diverse, and you see everyone. A lot of young white families moving in, and that's all a good thing.
The construction of the I-71 highway through Cincinnati has had a great impact on the Evanston and Walnut Hills community.
In fact, my family home at 3270 Beresford is the last house on the street when all the other houses were taken for I-71. And it really devastated I-71 through there and through Evanston, devastated other communities by breaking them neighborhoods. And, you know, as a little kid from about 5 on, my mother used to take my sister, you know, every evening in the summer over to what was called the Jewish Center, which was over on Blair. And so you could go around the corner, go across the railroad tracks, up the hill about 500 feet, and there was the Jewish Center. And it was a hub of recreational activity for, at that time, the African-American community. The Jewish community had moved out of that part of Avondale, but the black community and many people in the class who were black would utilize. There's a baseball field, marvelous swimming pool. I don't remember if there were tennis courts there. Might have been, I just don't remember. But it was a place, as I say, that my mother took us as kids to every day in the summer to watch baseball games, to watch people swim, or to swim. You know, I don't remember what we did exactly, but it was a great community and civic center. Evanston had the same impact. It turns out, much to my surprise, when I was in college as maybe a freshman or sophomore, I was hired in the Gilligan administration, of all things, as a summer intern on the highway department, and my job was to inspect the quality of the concrete that they were laying down on that very street. I knew nothing of highway making decisions about where highways go, but 71 would have had a quite a negative impact on community development and growth in Evanston and in Walnut Hills. Now, most recently, I've been talking to people about this, and I've analyzed it this way, that the fact of the matter is that I don't know a single, quote, poorer community or working class community where, does anybody know where you don't see I-71 going through Indian Hill, do you? Or Mariemont? Or Hyde Park? And that's because typically poorer communities in the census tracts don't have the political muscle, organization, and even experience to be able to challenge private public decisions like that.
Mr. Yates expands on his membership in the Cincinnati Literary Club.
There is a very, very private club in Cincinnati that most people don't know about called the Literary Club of Cincinnati. It is the oldest literary club in the United States, begun in 1849. Among its members have been justices of the United States Supreme Court, including 2 Chief Justices, Salmon P. Chase and William Howard Taft. Stanley Matthews is the other Supreme Court Justice. There have been many governors, 9 federal judges, a great collection of business people, 5 United States senators, and me. It's limited to 100 members, and 2 weeks ago I was elected as a member of the Literary Club of Cincinnati, of which historically, and as a historian myself, greatly proud of, I have a great number of books that are associated with Cincinnati, including a first edition of the first African-American historian, whose name was George Washington Williams, who was the first African-American member of the Ohio legislature, but he wrote a history, called it the History of the Negro from 1619 to 1880. And he was really the first professional African-American history in this country. I have those volumes, which you can't really find them anywhere, as well as a first edition of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. And I have 2 first editions of Dr. Du Bois' The Suppression of the Slave Trade in the United States, which were printed in 1896 out of his dissertation. Oh, by the way, in order to get into the Literary Club, it's harder than pledging a fraternity. or sorority, you have to be nominated by, I think, at least 3 people. And since it's a closed society, there are 99 millionaires in me. I'm the only one who's not a millionaire. Everybody else is a million. And then you have to, in order to get in, you have to write a paper that is sent to an original historical paper that is sent through the Board of Management. Many people, as I understand it, have had their papers returned to be edited and all that. Mine got through on the first swipe, 2,000 words. And it's relevant here because my paper was on the history of Walnut Hills and my family. I'm so proud of that.
We would like to thank Judge Tyrone Yates for sharing his understanding and knowledge of the history of Walnut Hills and Evanston and larger Black history in Cincinnati. And we would like to thank the Ohio Humanities Council for the generous grant that made this happen.